Welcome to the Crypto Podcast. You can find all our episodes on cryptopodcast.org. We're also on BitChute and YouTube, and you'll find the links in the podcast description. I also have the Awakening Podcast, Learn Polish Podcast, Meditation Podcast to help you chill, Speaking Podcast to help you speak, and all can be found on roycon.com. Today, my guest, please welcome Sae'Von Springer.
Hey, great day, Roy. I appreciate you making the time, and I'm excited to be here. You're a busy man. You got about 1,000 podcasts, so glad I was able to find an entrance.
What I saw some of your videos, and I saw you've got a professional microphone, and you've got a great voice. You know, it's something like because you've got the kind of radio voice that you could listen to. Do you do podcasting, or have you been on radio as well before?
Yeah. So it's funny you say that. I'm actually at my mother's house right now, which is why I don't have my setup. I came out here to visit her, but yeah, I've been doing podcasting. I started in 2015 doing podcast with my roommate in college. And so we did 2 different iterations of a podcast. And then after that, I started another podcast with a current one that I have with a partner of mine. His name's James Gillespie, and that one's called 80/20. And then I also have a podcast for Native Assets, and I happen to make music as well. So I've been putting out music since 2014. So yeah, I get some reps in with my voice for sure.
Excellent. Always use your skill set.
Yeah, I absolutely got to.
So you might let people know who's Sae'Von.
Absolutely. So so basically I'm interested in a bunch of things, but the last several years I've really focused my energy on helping increase the general population's blockchain literacy. And so all that really means is that I have put together resources, information, videos, a book that I put out, podcasts to help people really wrap their heads around what is blockchain, cryptocurrencies, Web3, and what are their use cases, their applications, but also what are the risks associated around those things. And so I go into the minutia of investing, trading, all those sorts of things. And and I put that all out through Native Assets. That's the name of the firm. So that's what I am presently most focused on. But as I mentioned, I also make music and, do a lot of other stuff too.
Oh, cool. So I've heard a little bit of Web3, but I don't know much about it. You might let me know a bit about that.
Yeah, so Web3 is basically this kind of catch-all term, and it's definitely a buzzword right now. So you'll see a lot of people add Web3 to something. But basically what it means is it's typically some sort of decentralized, oftentimes, but what it really is a application that really is leveraging blockchain tools and technologies to power their service or their product. So to give you an idea, you have things like BitChute or Library, and you could say that those are Web3 versions of YouTube because they're decentralized in nature. They're uploaded to some sort of decentralized file sharing platform. And then you look at the same thing with their Twitter alternatives, but then there's also applications that you can only build using some of these blockchain technologies. So we think of something like a MetaMask wallet or how you interact with a website like OpenSea. These are things that all require you to interact directly with the blockchains themselves, using your wallet primarily as your sign-in, as your account, kind of your user profile, that sort of thing. But Web3 is really just this idea of taking things that maybe existed traditionally in web apps or mobile apps and then porting those over with enhanced functionality provided by building on top of these different blockchain technologies.
Yeah, cool. And like the listeners on this, I've got kind of seasoned people that are into blockchain and crypto, but there's also the purpose was kind of for people that haven't a clue as well. And, I'm getting feedback from both sides, so it's actually good. Like say centralized, decentralized. You might explain that because some people wouldn't have a clue about that.
Perfect. No. That's a great thing to distinguish. So basically the idea, when you think of centralized, that's when you think of kind of the behemoth structures that control. Kind of, you can think of it, the extreme version of centralization is a monopoly. So if you think about Facebook and how they have all of your data, it's a very centralized company. You can't just go and get Facebook's code and then use it to build your own thing. You can't just go in and find their data and their metrics other than what they may want to show you. And so then when you think decentralized, it's the polar opposite of that. And the extreme version of decentralization is effectively anarchy, where the people rule themselves. And then, there's these emergent qualities. And so when you think of a decentralized structure, obviously you have something like a DAO, which is kind of just a decentralized version of people to organize themselves, but it's usually open source code, open source to all the data and information, all the facets you can basically think of related to that company, that service, or that product are open and accessible to everyone. And so in certain applications like trading, for instance, is a good example. Coinbase is a centralized exchange. And then if you look at something like Uniswap, is decentralized. So with Coinbase, you have to provide your photo, ID, your driver's license, passport. You have to do the KYC, the know your customer. They have AML regulations, anti-money laundering. Uniswap, so long as you have a Web3 wallet, a decentralized self-custody wallet like a MetaMask, you can jump on there and you can make any trade you want to. Now, there's a little asterisk there that I don't need to go into because it may confuse your listeners. But by and large, that's kind of the big distinction between centralized and decentralized.
And the second one then, is it possible they can just kind of pull the plug and keep everyone's money? I know if you have it on the cold wallet as such, it's okay. You're just putting it in to do the transfer. But like, yeah. Do you know who owns it? Because I mean, sometimes we're looking at, like you mentioned, Facebook, YouTube. A lot of the times the bad boys are controlling these things, and I just that's my fear for investors.
Yeah, no, for sure. And that's a great thing to consider. And so it's important to understand exactly how these things are working, because yes, there are situations where somebody might use a borrowing or a lending platform in DeFi, which is decentralized finance, and then somebody can rug pull, which is basically where the developers shut down the project overnight, and then all the funds are gone and they drain the wallet. Now, the important thing to note about that is, one, doing your own diligence, which is important no matter if you're in crypto, you're in traditional finance, you're a construction worker. You should always do your homework and know what it is you're getting involved with. And so when somebody is searching for these protocols, you can look up who built it or who are the contributors. You can usually go on a GitHub or something like that and actually look at the code repository to see what's going on. And if you're actually pretty smart contract savvy, you can find the functions in the contract that would allow the creators or the people who initiated this platform to drain all of the funds, because there has to be a function that allows them to do so, or an exploit based on how they've created it. But that being the case, there are plenty of very legitimate decentralized institutions or platforms rather, like Uniswap, like DYDX. And in almost all of those cases, the founders or the core contributors are not anonymous, meaning you can point a finger and say, this is the guy who created this, or this is the person who wrote the code to this thing. And another thing you can often look at is the history. How long has this platform been around? Has it been around for 2 weeks and now you want to put your life savings into it? Or has it been around for 2, 3, 4 years and they haven't ever really had a history of an exploit or a massive loss? And as far as your funds being even vulnerable to being, withdrawn or stolen from you, it depends on how you're interacting with the contract. If you're using something like a Uniswap, which is just a DEX, a decentralized exchange, what's actually happening is known as an atomic swap. And so it basically means that the code executes in such a way that the exchange itself never has your money. Your wallet holds your money. And all you do is you give the contract permission to, in this moment, exchange the funds that you are selling for the funds that you want to receive. And it does that at the same time. Now, you can go down after you do that, you can revoke permission from that decentralized exchange to even have the ability to interact with your wallet, which is a practice I would recommend people get into if you're especially new to this. And then, as you said, if it's existing on your cold storage wallet, then it's very, very difficult for somebody to get your funds off of it if they do not have your private keys. So it's relatively safe if you know what you're doing. And that's part of what we do in Native Assets, is teach you what you know how to do. Because just like Roy, it can be a lot when you first get into it. But once you do these things a few times, you realize everything is you either hitting send or withdraw or deposit. Those are the main things you're doing in all of these functions. You just need to understand how it's being abstracted to create something more complex.
It's like podcasting. The very first time you do it, everything is a panic. Stations kick in, and you haven't a clue how to edit, how to do anything. And then now you could do it in your sleep. You know, it's just the way it is with everything. And with the rug pull, I've heard 80% is rug pull. I don't know what the actual figures are, but is there any kind of crypto police that are going after these guys to try to reclaim some of the funds for people?
Ah, man, that's an amazing point. I also don't know if it's 80%. What I could see being probable is that 80% of projects rug pull, just because somebody can whip up a project in a few hours because all the code is open source. So you can literally go to Uniswap, take their code, make a couple changes, and then boom, you can launch a product. So in that sense, but definitely not 80% of the funds in crypto definitely have not been rug pulled, but maybe developers, I could actually see that be the case. Now, as far as anybody that kind of regulates or polices that, well, there's kind of police by the people, right? So when the community itself kind of, are watchdogs, and there are people who have dedicated Twitter accounts and YouTube accounts to letting people know, like, hey, rug alert, I think this project might rug, based on, what the contract looks like, or if they track back the history of these developers and what they've been involved with. And then you have different firms, like Chainalysis is one that are basically forensic firms for crypto. So they will audit the whole history of the blockchain to really trace back the origins of a transaction or an actor. A lot of times people can kind of figure out, even if you've used a mixer, to kind of obfuscate where the funds came from. And we're starting to see more so intervention from governments and regulatory agencies to enforce that, this behavior can't go on. Because ultimately, I think there's been debate for some time, but in my humble opinion, it shouldn't be a debate anymore. The US is pro-crypto. They have no choice but to be, because of their constituencies' desires. And we see that going that way with moves from BlackRock, Fidelity, institutional investors, and people in government themselves. And so they also have to begin to act in the role of enforcing the punishments for these bad actors. I'll give you an example. I think it was last week, there were two people who had launched an NFT project, and they rug pulled for over, I think, $2 or $3 million. And so somehow, somewhere, some regulatory government, adjacent agency pushed this to prosecution, to punish these actors who scammed these investors in their NFT projects. So sure, some people get away scot-free, but that's definitely changing, and the industry as a whole is becoming more compliant and more savvy, even the users, to kind of know, kind of be able to smell like, this smells like this might be some bullshit, and kind of avoid it. Excuse my French, I don't know if I said it, but yeah.
And like you mentioned BlackRock. I mean, just for those that don't know, like, that's one of the BlackRock and Vanguard. I think they're one of the biggest companies in the world. I don't know how many trillion they're worth, but they own like percentages in Coca-Cola, in Pepsi, and McDonald's, every company. In other words, they control the world. Like, these guys are so powerful. So what I wanted to ask you is, I seen it from a BBC thing. I mean, I don't really trust BBC. I trust BBC as same as I trust CNN. I think they went to the same school of lying. But they mentioned that the Russians were considering using Bitcoin for oil and gas. Payment. Yeah, is that what's your call on that?
I've heard the same thing. If I understand it correctly, it was one of the ministers, kind of like a congressman or a representative in their legislature, who was, it's through a translation. So I don't speak Russian, so I can't say I heard it from the horse's mouth. And it doesn't have to be true necessarily. But I have heard the same thing. And similarly, I believe it was not Texaco, but one of these major oil producers and gas producers in the United States, that has actually also gone on record to say that they are also looking to capture their flare gas, so basically their waste products from their mining operations, and mine Bitcoin with that energy. And Exxon, that's the company, I believe it is. And so from my understanding, they've begun trialing this. They began trials in 2020. And then they ramped trials up in 2021. So now they were full on, like, cool, we did the beta test, we fine-tuned some things, we will be mining Bitcoin. And so that's another domino effect. And I think what's really going on with Russia, and I'm no geopolitical expert, but I'm not a dummy either. And I have studied these things since high school. But from my understanding, just how I'm looking at the whole landscape, war is very different in 2022 than war was in 1922. And what I mean by that is most of the war is done without a shot being fired. The war is psychological. The war is emotional. The war is economic. And that's what I believe we are really seeing potentially ramp up is this economic warfare between nations. We've seen over the last several years, Russia and China, they said, you know what, we can do these oil deals between ourselves and we don't got to use the dollar, right? And China being the largest holder of US debt, at some point, they will begin to offload those dollars. They will get rid of them. And so as we see these things kind of taking shape, and then Russia comes out, it's like, you know what, we might, after they get pushed out of the SWIFT payment system, right? They're like, you know what, we might just start taking some Bitcoin, And so then what's that going to lead China to do? And then as we've seen with the executive order from the administration of the United States, it's basically, and I've said this for years, there's going to be an arms race for Bitcoin, most likely, because if Russia moves on it, and the US doesn't, now if Russia puts $1 billion, $2 billion, $5 billion, $10 billion, whatever, and sure, I understand that the Bitcoin market cap can only absorb so much money and remain liquid, but it has to get that money eventually to become liquid. So we are seeing this happen in stages. And then once we hit the right tipping point, cat's out of the bag, so to say.
And with the mining then, because I've heard that at once, I don't know when that was a few years ago, they were saying that the mining was equivalent to all the electricity used in Ireland with a population of 5 million. Not sure, but I mean, I've seen some of the big, huge warehouses that are doing it. Is it something you do yourself? And what's your thoughts on the mining? Because obviously there's different crypto that doesn't use the same kind of power.
Yeah, again, phenomenal equipment. I'm loving this discussion, Roy. This is great, man. This is enjoyable. So as far as mining itself, I do not mind personally, reason being, unless you are joining a mining pool. And even then, long story short, basically, it takes a substantial amount of capital to deploy into the mining operation. And then you have to effectively be managing this operation full time for it to be profitable in the long term. Sure, if you get things set up the right way, and in most instances, it is cheaper to mine a Bitcoin than to buy a full Bitcoin. But that if that still requires $35,000 instead of $40,000 and all of my time and me buying hardware and having land and space and then getting all the different things in place, that's not something that most people can really handle or manage on a day-to-day basis, let alone deploy the capital in that way. And so for most people, it will be far more profitable and practical for them to simply buy Bitcoin and then let it appreciate down the road versus trying to launch an entire business that has its own complexities and nuances around it. So there's that component of it, which is why I don't mind Bitcoin. But if anybody is interested in mining as a general thing, there are many other assets, digital assets, other than Bitcoin that are valuable that you can mine for far less out-of-pocket expense than what is required with Bitcoin. And in that vein, I would recommend things like Helium Network, which is a decentralized internet network. And so that's something that can be mined. There's also things
because I've seen something on that and I was curious, and I'd seen, I don't know, like TikTok has some brilliant people on crypto, and they're like guys showing the figures and they actually going into their computer, like they were making lots of. So you buy a device and plug it in. Is that how the Helium one works?
Yeah. So with Helium, it's so funny because in March and April time of 2021, I was about to order some Bobcat miners. And so Bobcat is one of the companies that creates these mining devices for Helium. And the other thing about it is it's far more simple than Bitcoin. And the life cycle for the device itself is far longer from my understanding. Because basically all you're doing is you're buying a radio, you're buying a router, a repeater, and then you take it, you put it on your house, you run your own network through it, your own internet connection, and then it amplifies it and it shoots and it shares that connection with the network. And they have these maps you can pull up that show you kind of how to optimize it. So if you really want to make the most money, you need to have at least 3 of these miners to kind of create, a triangulation. And you want to be in an area that's not too saturated with miners already, but doesn't have too few, because they ultimately need to kind of connect to the next one. And so, yeah, you order some of these miners and they go anywhere between, I think, $300 on the very low end to sometimes $700-800, depending on the range you want, the strength of the signal, that sort of thing. and also, how weatherproof they are, all of that. But there's a bunch of selection from them, and it's pretty straightforward to do. At the time I was looking at it, they were super back ordered, and the Helium token price was just going parabolic, and I was getting FOMO, and I was like, man, it's gonna run away from me by the time they get here. They talk about 3 months before it gets delivered. And in hindsight, I probably should have just ordered the damn things, because the price for Helium now is cheaper than what it was when I was thinking about ordering them in the first place. So that's just one, and there's so many other currencies that can be mined.
Just on it, because one of my podcasts were kind of exposing a lot of stuff, and one of the things was the Amazon doorbell. And I know that even with the Wi-Fi, is there some kind of, are you putting yourself at risk with these things? Is there something that they could be capturing your information, because they might be going, hey, let's get some money for you, and everybody's in on this, but they're really stealing all your information? Is that a possibility?
So I would say it is certainly a possibility, from the sense that we are talking about an internet connection. And so, I am not versed enough in the hardware to open the box up and be like, oh, this is the little chip, that allows them to steal all your data running through it, because these things exist. But even on a personal level, right? When I thought about it more deeply, more critically, I realized as well that my values were not aligned with that project, because what they are doing is amplifying a 5G network. And we don't got to go into all the minutiae of it, but there's a lot of stuff people can look up about 5G before everybody was talking about COVID or worried about it, that have shown that 5G, the frequency band, is a frequency range that the military uses for weapons. There's a weapon known as the active denial system. And they literally had a demonstration of this on the History Channel many years ago. And it basically allows them to create like a force field that makes your body, it basically heats up and excites the cells inside of your body. And so it makes you feel like you're being cooked from the inside out. And there's you don't see anything. It literally is invisible, but that's what the effect it has on your body. And this is using inside of the frequency range that the 5G network, the internet band occupies. So when I think about those things and just how many studies have actually been put out about the potential impacts of 5G on our cellular respiration, I'm like, do I want to get a check to spread this damn thing? And I'm like, I can get checks other ways. I'm okay. Now, that's no judgment on anybody. If they got to do what they got to do, but that's the reality.
Yeah, and just on that, because sometimes people might hear this for the first time, but I spoke to a military expert, a good while ago, and they were using that in Northern Ireland against the Catholics, basically. And also they can actually change they can change how you think, they can make people get into arguments and everything. That technology is very dangerous. And in the city I'm in the third biggest city in Poland. The amount of towers that have gone up, they're on top of schools, they're on top of hospitals, which is the last place they should be. The whole lot is orchestrated, and it's like buyer beware. And I like the ethics thing. And it's actually something that I want to discuss as well, because I watched your video, because, you have a course on the thing, and we can discuss that as well. But what I loved, because I'm big into marketing, I've done a load of stuff over the years. And I know how it works. I know how when people, they're starting a course and they're bringing it to a webinar and it's la-di-da-da. By the way, I got this. You said it straight at the start. Hey, this is what it is. And I love that. I said, you're showing who you are, because the reality is everybody is doing something to get the customers in. I mean, that's, call a spade a spade. But I thought it was actually, and I think it's probably beneficial for you, because people will respect that. Because a lot of the times people go through the process and then they go, oh, he's just trying to rip me off. And they might have been interested had the person been honest at the start.
I really, really appreciate that, Roy, because, even before I had that version of it, because I myself, I like to build things, man. I like to create the stuff. I like to think the ideas. But a lot of times when it comes to the marketing phase of things, that's where I've broken down in the past, because it's like, I don't want to sell this thing, even though I literally used to sell knives that were thousands of dollars and teach people how to do it. And so basically, as I was working on the course, I brought on this marketing firm, and they specialize in high ticket programs. And so I brought them on. It cost me $10,000 to hire this company. They give you 3 months of their time. And when I was speaking with them, they were telling me, they were hyping me up. I should be selling this for $10,000, and to do exactly what you just said. Do the funnel, give them a little bit, and then make the fourth secret that you need my help, and then get a discovery call. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. But to your point, I'm a straight shooter. I'm from Atlanta, man. This is the city where people are finessing, capping, lying, getting over, but we can call the spade. So I said, you know what? For me as Sae'Von, not as the marketer, not as the founder and managing partner of Native Assets, but as Sae'Von, I feel much more comfortable just saying, hey, this is designed to sell you something. I'm going to give you some information, but ultimately there is a transaction that I am hoping takes place if you feel comfortable and this makes sense and you feel this is worth it to you. And I knew that was risky to some degree, but it felt more authentic. And I went way from that $10,000 price point to $300 basically, because I said, you know what, if I'm really trying to help people, most people cannot spend 10 grand on this. And also the trade-off of my own time. I don't want to be on the phone for 6 hours a day trying to close somebody. I'd rather go live my life, spend time with my newborn son, talk to people like you and enjoy life, and then wake up in the morning and see some money hit my account because I set it up to automatically help people. And so then I just started taking a lot of the information and putting it out on LinkedIn for free, on YouTube for free, so that there is still a lot of valuable, useful information for people, as well as the book. The book, there's an audio book I recorded for free. The book itself is like $20, I think, on Amazon. And a lot of the core information that people really need is in there. So, I've tried to make it as accessible as I can.
And what's the name of the book? I actually meant to write it down and I forgot. So you might let it, because I mean, they need to hear it anyway. So what's the name of the book? And you might just let us know the different topics that you cover in it.
For sure. Thank you. So the name of the book is The Blockchain Blueprint, A Practical Guide to Crypto in an Impractical Age of Fiat. And the purpose of that book is to really help people who recognize that blockchain, crypto, Web3, NFTs, that this stuff is here to stay, right? That's no longer a debate, and that they should have a better understanding of how it works, at least a basic literacy of how it works. And so that's really the approach. So we go through, what is cryptocurrency? Because a lot of times people say cryptocurrency, and that's actually incorrect. They're digital assets because most of them are not currencies. You got coins, you got tokens. So we talk about that. We talk about the value and the use case of Ethereum. What is a smart contract platform? Why does it matter? If you understand Ethereum, you understand every other smart contract, for the bare minimum, what you need to understand. We go through Bitcoin as well. And when we do that, we take a pros and cons approach. We look at the technology itself. We look at the development team. We look at the economics around the token itself. And we also look at the hurdles that it's faced in its history so far and its best prospects for success down the road. And along there, we also talk about a decentralization versus centralized entities, self-custody solutions, cold storage, those sorts of things. So it's pretty comprehensive, but it's also pretty succinct. It's about 165 pages, if you don't count the front and the back matter. And we run through all those topics. So that the approach was tell them everything they need to know and nothing more. Really, and combined anecdotal information with some hard figures as well.
I love that, because I remember at the start, I got a lot of Kindle books and I was like bamboozled, because the amount of fluff that people put in, they'll talk 20 pages to tell you something that they could do in one.
I didn't want to do that. Now, there was a couple segments where, I'm a writer at heart. So there are a few, paragraphs where I do construct kind of a eloquent story for kind of drama. But, I might have fun with that for a paragraph. I'm not going to do that for 10 pages.
But that's a story is good, because the story makes you remember it. But there's people, they're basically trying to fluff up a book, So knowing that you're
40 pages, definitions, and
So which wallet would you actually recommend? Because it's a ledger that I've got, but I've heard of all different ones. Is there any that you think is a safer one for people?
So when we talk about, because I talk about this in the course in the book, and also fun fact, the book is literally a slice of the course. I literally took the writing presentations I did for the recorded video course, and then I took what I didn't already write down. I ran my videos through a transcription program, and then I went back through and edited it and, made it a book. So also, I just gave you a little bit of sauce. If you ever want to go through your podcast and kind of create a greatest hits and write a book from it, I just gave you a little bit of sauce on the way you can do that.
I've already done that with some. I've got the speaking podcast, because I've had so many guests, and the awakening as well. I actually have about 8 books that are in the pipeline. Yeah, because it's amazing content. And it's the same with this. I know that after so many episodes, there's so much knowledge that's shared that some people, they prefer the actual book. And I know that
absolutely. Then you can make an audio book of the book that you took from audio. So yeah, it's a self-feeding cycle. But if we're talking about hardware wallets, I personally use a Ledger. I think Ledger is tried and true. Now, the thing I would just remind people about Ledger is if you really want like the greatest degree of security, don't get the X, get the S, because the X has Bluetooth. And if it has Bluetooth, it technically means it has some degree of vulnerability from a remote actor, whereas the S, the original version, does not have Bluetooth. It's not as fancy. So that also means that you literally have to be touching, connected to the device to do anything with it. But some people, they don't like the fact that the code is not open sourced for Ledger. That doesn't bother me as much. But I also see all the things that Ledger as a company is doing, and I think that they do a better job than any other of the hardware wallets to actually educate the user base, put out content, marketing, and kind of know how important that their device is and make it interoperable with things like the MetaMask wallet. Now, as far as a web wallet, what I would recommend there would be something like MetaMask. Personally, if you're using Ethereum, now I will say, you may be aware of this. Also, I don't know if that's me. I really apologize. I don't know what tab that is. But the thing that they had with Infura, that really disappointed me. A couple of weeks back, where the thing went on with Russia and Ukraine. And then Infura, for people who don't know, is basically, it's the client that a lot of people who run Ethereum nodes, they run them using Infura. Now, from my understanding, I did not go and manually do this at the time, but there are other networks you can use that should be able to run MetaMask in the background that are not Infura based. But for the average person, that'd be too complicated for them to do. But that's what I would recommend for the MetaMask.
No, excellent. Listen, Sae'Von, really enjoyed our conversation. And I know, because I'm trying to keep them at the sweet spot of half an hour, that, I'd like to get you back again and we go more deeper, because I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. But you might let people know how they can get in contact with you.
Absolutely. This has been lovely, Roy. You're really skilled at your craft, man, and I appreciate having you in the space and just respect your hustle and just how hard you're going. It's across all of the different platforms. So for people, if they want to find me, learn more about the course, sign up for it, or grab the book, the best thing to do is go to our website, which is nativeassets.co, and you'll find the Blockchain Foundations course there. You'll also find a way to download the electronic version of the book there as well. And then we also have the blog and everything. It's not as up to date. I'll get that up to date, but that's one way you can go. You can also visit us on YouTube and just look up Sae'Von Springer on YouTube. There's some videos there. Look up Sae'Von Springer on LinkedIn. And if you want to find us on Twitter, we're at Native Assets. And if you want to link to a lot of this stuff in one place, then we have a link tree. So just go to Linktree /Sae'Von Springer, and you can find it there.
No, excellent. And just to be careful with Linktree, because I had about 5 or 6 Linktrees and they removed 3 of them because I said I went against their guidelines, and I was given the link and everything. So I have another one, bio link now, which is seems to be a bit safer. But then again, I'm exposing corruption and fraud, so you should be safe enough just talking about crypto. So I think you should. But just on the video as well, the YouTube, I looked at some of your videos, and I like that, because they're they're 1 to kind of 5 minutes, but you're giving good information, and so I'd encourage that. But what I'll do is I'll put all the links to everything that you've just said in the podcast, both the audio and the video. So listen, it's been a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you so much, Ron. I look forward to the next one, brother.
Yeah, great. So that's all for the Crypto Podcast. You'll find all our episodes on cryptopodcast.org, on BitChute and YouTube. And be sure to give us a thumbs up, 5-star rating. Really helps. Until next week, take care.